Morning Scoop Nation, and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, October 25th. I will be joined today by TJ Downing as we discuss takeaways from the Iowa game this past weekend, some top performers, and what we were able to learn both from this team as well as from the college football landscape as a whole. We'll also look ahead to Penn State and see what it would take for the Nittany Lions to potentially play spoiler to this Ohio State team in Happy Valley, and the likelihood that that could happen on Halloween weekend. As always, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Buckeye Scoop YouTube channel so that you can stay up to date with all of the most recent content as soon as it's released. And if you're not a member yet, be sure to check out buckeyescoop.com and join today so that you have access to the Ask the Insiders board as we get into the October stretch and November stretch of games in the Big Ten, leading into what hopes to be a Big Ten championship and a college football playoff championship for the Ohio State Buckeyes. With that being said, join me in welcoming TJ as we get started on today's episode. TJ, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Good, man. Good. It's fun that we had some football back this weekend in Columbus. That's always a thing. It's always a good thing to get a win. Weather's cooperating, so we actually had like a nice weather weekend of college football and high school football around the state of Ohio. So, yeah, man, doing good. Sad to see that regular season for high school football is over, and we're kind of nearing the end here for college football too. You know, what's the old saying? We say October or September's for pretenders and November's for contenders. There it is.
Yeah.
Old Jim Circle saying. So we're getting ready to step into that next week where you're going to find out who the real contenders are.
Yeah, the bulk of the schedule is really picking up, and especially just the last 2 weeks too. I mean, you've seen so many more like ranked matchups, so many more top 10 matchups. Big 12, especially in the Big 12, I feel like it's been TCU versus a top 10, 15 team every single week, I feel like, and they've got a couple of matchups still on the road here coming up, but SEC's getting really into the thick of everything. You got a couple rivalry games this weekend, a couple big games next weekend, and the Big Ten, we all know what's going on there. So we got Penn State this weekend, but really wanted to start off today and just go over kind of a recap and takeaways of the Iowa game. Obviously, I underestimated, I think, the power of the offense against this Iowa defense because 50 plus points is nothing to shake a stick at, especially with Kirk Ferentz. But what were your initial just kind of takeaways from the game and what we can kind of learn from this team?
Yeah, I too was a lot like you, thinking, thought maybe we'd have our way running the ball against them, and it really wasn't the case. I mean, your leading rusher, 38 yards for Trev. I mean, thought we would have gotten more out of that. He didn't even get into the end zone. Maya Williams was able to get the lone rushing touchdown. I thought at least against this Iowa defense, we'd have at least 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns. But, as I mentioned, I thought this would be like a Tommy Ike type game where he would step up and really kind of flex for Ohio State's defense. Maybe even, I think I threw out maybe a Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week award for him if he could really fill in this game like we thought he could. Jack Campbell did that for the Iowa defense. I mean, he was in there on 9 tackles. I mean, led the defense. We kind of knew coming in that he was going to be one of their main guys and it's going to have to be somebody that we were going to have to block and put a hat on.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tell a game that ends up 54-10 where you were kicking a bunch of field goals early. You were not. You use a map in your car. You're not really thinking that you're going to struggle with Iowa's defense the way that you were. So for me, that was just kind of surprising.
Hey, real quick, sorry, it's something else is playing in the background.
Yeah, just I had one of my computers fire up here. My studio is under construction, and I'm in the bank vault where you guys get stories from the vault every week, and I'm gonna have some really good ones coming up this week for Penn State.
Oh, nice.
But I don't know if you got a chance to hear last week our Iowa stories from the vault. Back when I had to save Kirk Barton, our scoop prez, I had to save his life up in Iowa City.
I remember you mentioned it on our conversation last week, and I checked it out once you put it out. But yeah, if you haven't listened, definitely check it out at the Buckeye Scoop YouTube channel. It's available there. Is it available on your um, own links as well, or you can plug those as well?
If you just go to the Buckeye Scoop YouTube page, and then I'll have it up. You'll see it every week up on my Twitter account. So follow along there, OG7 Deuce, and got a lot of stuff over at Stark Media Team. So check out some different high school football action coming down the line. But we always kind of try and put it out there, stories from Vault every week, and kind of really just the premise behind it. Giving people a little insight from a player's side, like the stories you just might not hear.
Yeah.
And it's not always just going to be stories from back when I played, but for Wisconsin week, we threw it back to a good buddy of mine who played up there in Iowa, and they dumped the hairy buffalo on him. So Earl Bruce is screaming from the sidelines, like, "Get him out! He's got a red jersey on. Everybody's in the white," and he's out there kind of wringing it out of his mouth like before they kick off, trying to get it all out. So we'll have some other stories we'll kick from back in the day, buddies of ours. We're gonna have a cool little thing coming up too. Want to start promoting this, man. If people can get out there to the Unverfirth house, everybody remembers the legend John Hicks. We're going to have something out there that we'll be announcing. You follow along on Buckeye Scoop, also Stark Media Team on our different social media platforms. But a huge, the John Hicks Unverfirth Unlimited Love Foundation, what they're going to do there for not just only Don Unverfirth, but for diabetes around the area, for people struggling, for people that can't afford certain things. John Hicks's mission was to give back to others. And so there was a huge event. We did it I'm drawing a blank. It was over there in Westerville last year on the location, but had about a couple thousand people show up. Great live auction, hang out, rub elbows with guys like Beanie and Keith Byers and Buster Douglas is always in the house. So yeah, man, it's good stuff, man. Being able to try and give back and tell some stories and hear about guys,
I think I might have actually bid on some of those items because I think I remember the auction you were talking about as well. But yeah,
the
there
gloves
was a ton
like
of stuff there.
$125. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, Buster Douglas who beat Mike Tyson, like I need a pair of gloves for the man cave.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I keep getting reminders about different auctions and stuff now coming out of that too. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on, and those vault stories I really always look forward to as well. It just gives you that insight that you don't really get anywhere else. So definitely, if you haven't seen them, check them out. BuckeyeScoop.com, Stark Media. There's a ton of content available for all those kind of insights here, and I'm sure Penn State will lead to many more stories as we get closer to that as well.
A place to play, man.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game, and I think one thing that I took away from this Iowa game too is the defense to me, and I don't know, maybe it's, I mean, yeah, Iowa's offense is abysmal, so I don't know how much we can actually learn about this Ohio State defense, but I don't think you can really discount what they were able to do, even in spite of Iowa's offensive struggles, because I mean, almost seven turnovers with that extra fumble that went out of bounds. I mean, Michigan didn't do that. Nobody's been able to do that. I mean, this is something that even as terrible as that offense is, you still got to play defense, and their ability to play as well as they did and hold a team to, what was it, 160 total yards, I think at most, is impressive. Is really impressive, and I think Jim Knowles has this team. What, they're number 2 in total defense right now, which is insane. Where we were last year with the same roster of people,
That's a head scratcher, isn't it?
I know, it's incredible to me to know. Like, I really want to know now what was Kerry Coombs doing with this group, because the change is there, and it didn't take long to do it, and it just took the right person, and Ryan Day has made a fantastic hire and going out and getting the guy that he wanted, and we're paying dividends at this point in the season so far, and I think that's going to be a really big crutch for this team to rely on as we get closer, to the end of the season, with teams like Penn State, even teams like Maryland who can put up points. The defense is going to be really impactful, I think, in that game, and obviously the Michigan game is the one that everybody's circled on the calendar. But what were some of your thoughts just from a defensive standpoint? From an offensive standpoint, I think there's a lot that we can grow from this week. But again, I'm not really ever concerned with the offense under Ryan Day. So What were some of kind of like your main takeaways from this defense, and do you think that we can actually expect them to stay kind of at that level as we get like deeper into the Big Ten schedule here?
Yeah, again, back to Tommy Eichenberg. I mean, he's expected to be a leader when you're in the middle of the defense, scored a touchdown in the ball game, right? I mean, he's I don't know if he's going to get that Big Ten Player of the Week nod, but I think when you see him constantly ringing up tackles, like we talked about, Jack Campbell does for Iowa. You know, when
Mm,
your middle linebacker, you want him to feel. We always at Ohio State, we want our middle linebacker to feel like Andy Katzenmoyer. You know, we've had so many legendary linebackers, and I think that's a little something I'm gonna have to throw out here on the thread on Buckeye Scoop. We did a Mount Rushmore for running
hmm.
backs. But what would your linebacker one look like? I mean, I'm watching a throwback game the other night with a guy like Steve Tovar. How many great linebackers like
Yeah.
Randy Gradishar, Marcus Merritt, going all the way back through the day, even up to my time with AJ Hawk. But we just want that linebacker to look physical, but to be able to move around well. And that's the one thing I like about Eichenberg. And that's the difference of what you asked about the defense from last year to this year. It just feels like we're in a better position to cover down on people when we need
Hmm.
to compared to before. And I don't know if, I mean, personnel wise, if you just throw it on that, because as you mentioned, a lot of the same dudes from last year. Um, we just didn't feel like we could ever cover down on somebody when we needed to make a stop. Certain situations we couldn't get it done, and that was against higher end competition. So I get it, and
Yeah.
higher end pass rush like Hutchinson coming off the edge. There were certain things you just have to deal with inside of an offensive or from a defensive side and offensive side that there are variables in game that happen. You don't expect Iowa's defense to limit our rush game, and they did. But for
Hmm.
us defensively, to be able to constantly be providing pressure up front to getting a helmet sticker. When you limit somebody to under
Yeah.
20 points in a ball game, you're getting a helmet sticker. So 10 points on the board for the Iowa Hawkeyes. You know what? That's a helmet sticker. That's a good job by the defense. And I want to be able to see linebackers who can cover, because as we get deeper into the season and you talk about potentially facing SEC, ACC talent,
Hmm.
um, and dealing with the Michigan Wolverines and their offense, you were going to have to be able to cover down from the linebacker position. People know that has been a weakness in the past. And as you mentioned, paying dividends, also paying a high price tag to be able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get Knowles in here, but that's good, better, best, right? Nothing against Kerry Coombs. Love what he did down in Cincinnati at Coleraine, and where I believe he's at Cincinnati right now.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, I like Kerry Coombs. Defensively, he made me want to pull my hair out. Maybe I understand why he's got that Jackrabbit white hair. Um, but love what Jim Knowles is doing, man. It just seems like night and day defense,
Yeah.
night and day defense all the way around.
A big thing too, and it's something that I think at the beginning of the year there were still questions like, is Jim Knowles going to coach from the sideline? Is he going to coach from the box? And I don't know if he's had a game where he's coached on the sideline. I've only ever seen him in the box, and I think that's I know Kerry Coombs really wanted that energy. He was the high energy, wanted to greet his players coming off the field and just get them excited, and that was great. If we're playing well, but I think that that's a big thing that's gone kind of maybe underestimated too with the defensive coordinator position is Jim Knowles is able to really see everything a lot better and make the calls and adjustments that he needs to, and I think that's largely been a piece that I've noticed that he does specifically differently from Kerry Combs that I think has been proven to improve what this team has been able to do on the defensive side.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, when you pay a price tag like that, when you're paying a guy, and I think you and I had maybe even talked about this at a point to where, what's the difference from shifting from Oklahoma State to Ohio State
Yeah.
just to be defensive coordinator again? Is that a lateral move? Is that a Bielema going from Wisconsin down to Arkansas? Is that a lateral move? Where Jim Knowles probably would have had his hat thrown around in a lot of circles to be a head coach somewhere.
Hmm.
So what do you kind of differentiate there, and how long are you going to have him? Well, a lot of that is how much can you pay him, and fortunately for schools like Alabama, schools like Ohio
Yep.
State, Michigan, that Florida have those big donor support bases and a lot of money there. I mean, you can put a slush fund together of $300 million overnight at a school like that. You can hire anybody that you want. So works out well at schools like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this is the year he gets his Broyles award as well.
Yeah.
I think last year it's getting more and more obvious the snub of Jim Knowles last year with Gaddis winning the Broyles Award and seeing what he's done down at Miami, which is not anything to write home about at this point so far in the season. They have not looked very good, but I think his turnaround over this defense is solidified that in my opinion. And obviously, there's a little bit of bias there, but I don't know how you don't give it to somebody that takes a defensive unit that was, in the I don't even know where they finished last year, but I know it was around probably in the 100 pass defense specifically, and then you put them into the number two. Like, it's insane. And I was looking
Yeah.
through like all the game MVPs and the people I would give stickers to, and it's most of from this game, especially most of them came from the defense. I mean, they were flying around all over the place. And again, yes, Iowa's offense is terrible, but you still got to play and you still got to cover and you still got to close. And this is the same team that threw for 250 yards plus against Michigan. So, they can at least put up some numbers, when they need to. And, the
Yeah.
ability to hold them to, I think it was like 81 yards passing is impressive. And I got to give my hat off to a lot of like the secondary. Tanner McAllister played great. Um, Denzel Burke played really well also, which was good to see. And you had some people stepping in injury time as well, and just getting kind of more of that exposure, more reps with Cam Brown being out. But who are some of, I guess, if you had to give stickers out from this game, who are the top people you're giving those out to this week?
I'm giving it back to Tommy Eichenberg just because I feel like he led the defense and he did what I expected him to do. So I wanted to see that. Um, for me offensively, it goes to CJ Stroud because I think with an anemic run game, he kind of just did what you hope a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback would do.
Hmm.
When you get into games like that, and I can relate one back to when I played when we went up to Illinois. And when we're out in Champaign and it's cold and we're the number one team in the country and it's the run game, it just feels like and I'm sure this is probably what a lot of the offensive linemen felt like the other day. It felt like every time you handed the ball off, whether you checked it and went the other way or whether you stayed with the same side that you were going to on that specific run, it just always felt like the defense had one extra guy there. And
Hmm.
that you were never going to be able to pop the big one. And it just nothing felt good in the run game. That's where the great quarterbacks take over. And CJ Stroud did that for me. So he gets another sticker. I'm the first guy to tell you, Ryan, I hate giving the quarterbacks the stickers, because there's
Yeah,
so many other pieces we can talk about that
yeah.
go into it. But when you talk about leaders, they're typically the first guy that you look to. And when nothing else is going, I mean, 48, 50 some, 60 some rush yards, it was CJ's turn to take over and
Hmm.
show why hopefully he does become the next quarterback since Troy Smith to win the Heisman Trophy.
Yep. And I think too, like to that point, the just improvement in game, I think was the biggest thing that I took away. Where struggling to even get the ball moving in plus territory after the turnovers, settling for field goals. There were a lot of off throws. Maybe it's a timing thing, with some of the receivers, or it's just out of reach. I remember the one to Marvin Harrison that hit his fingertips right as he's cutting out towards the sideline at the goal line, and it just was out of his reach. And so you saw a lot of those early on, and his ability to really kind of adapt and change his game and hit some of the throws that he was able to hit in the second half, was impressive to me, and I think that's a testament to his control, and it makes me more confident in his abilities in bigger games as we get closer to the end of the season and play teams like a Michigan or a Georgia or some of those other tough defenses that are really going to try and test him and test his strength and his just adaptiveness in game. And that was one that really stuck out to me, and seeing kind of what he was able to do. Granted, maybe he played a little bit too long, but I think you want to also get him in that habit of playing a tough defense and really getting back into a rhythm, even in late game scenarios where you're up big.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch adaptation. We used to call it, you want to be like the dinosaurs? Adapt or die.
Yeah.
Right? Eventually, when there's no food left on the table, you got to find a different way to eat. Adapt or die. And in game, that's the hardest thing. And again, I had to deal with it in the national championship game. We're on the biggest stage in 2007, taking on the Florida Gators, and it's
Hmm.
like in game we couldn't adapt, and you just literally, as an offense, feel like you're dying because nothing's working. There's really no game plan. It kind of went out the window. You lose one of your best athletes. And it's good to see these young guys and this young coaching staff. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. I mean, Ryan Day and Brian
Hmm.
Hartline, these cats are my age. They're not very old, and there's a new way of coaching out there now. And there's a strong supply of young, healthy coaching talent coming in through the college ranks.
Yeah.
And so Brian and Ryan are not they're not going to make the right call every time. But I think the way the kids respond to them offensively, and how they respond to Jim defensively, it's a good sign, and it's a good sign moving forward to let
Hmm.
you know that, hey, when we get into a tough ball game, we can figure this stuff out.
Yep. Absolutely. And you mentioned something, and I thought about it this weekend, and it just reminded me now. But I want your thought on this, because the Ted Ginn injury in that game, still have flashbacks, of nightmares of that. But I would thought of it because I always cringe anytime somebody scores, and it's either the lineman or they jump up to another receiver, what have you, but they throw them in the air, and I always cringe that like they're going to come down wrong on that foot and get hurt. But
Friendly
um,
fire, man. That's
yeah.
my Vietnam, man. It's like it's just everything was wrong. You're just Yeah, from that point forward, and I always felt like I jinxed us because we're kind of huddled up at the 20-yard line in Glendale, and I remember we would always say, let's huddle around the 20-25 because typically Teddy was going to get it out past the
Hmm.
25, so we wanted to be about 10 yards behind when it was all said and done coming out of the special teams play, and I remember just watching him take off and looking at the rest of the offense from the 25-yard line thinking, hey, nobody said we couldn't blow them out in the title
Right.
game, because nobody gave Florida any credit we hadn't played for 51 days since Michigan.
Mm,
They had 2 weeks extra because of Thanksgiving and then the championship game for the SEC. And so nobody's thought that Florida could beat us. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, maybe they were all right. And then
yeah.
about 3 hours later, reality set in.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately. But I was
this is
always
how you, this is how you're going to go out as a Buckeye. Dang.
yeah, yeah, you never, I mean, it's never a good situation. I always kind of go back and I'm like, man, I wonder how that game would have been different if that didn't happen. But I always
Oh,
cringe now, and I want to,
it's different for
yeah.
sure.
I wasn't sure if I'm the only one that cringes on celebrations like that, and I'm like, oh, just
To me,
please
it's the
no.
basketball court. When I
Yeah.
see these guys doing it in the Final Four, because that's my favorite tournament out there, man. I see some of these
Oh
guys
yeah.
dogpiling on hardwood, and hardwood is not forgiving. Like, I would not want to be the dude on the bottom of that.
No, absolutely not. I don't want to be a guy on the bottom of any dog pile, hardwood, grass. I don't care what
Yeah.
it is. You got 300
I
pound
was stuck
men
on the
jumping on
bottom.
top of you.
I
No,
was
no thanks.
I was stuck on the bottom of a pile in training camp one time with AJ Hawk, and I had blocked AJ, and it was a really nice block on my part. But the running back had cut off behind me, and somebody scraped behind from AJ. I think maybe the defensive end from the backside made the tackle, and it came right on top of me as I'm like trying to finish off AJ and
Mm,
pancake him. And it's a hot ass day out, right over there at the Woody Hayes outside, morning practice. Everybody's pissed because we're like 2 weeks in. Everybody's sore, like, don't want to be there right now. And I'm on the ballast, and you could feel as I'm on top of AJ, all these bodies coming down on
mm,
top of us. And we're like, it was almost like a garbage compactor was pressing our bodies into the ground. and wedging us in. And I'm looking at him and I can hear him hollering. And I'm over there like, I can't breathe.
Mhm.
There's no room under there to breathe because you talked about it. 300-pound dudes, like 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
Here's an eighth one. It's like, there's no room to even compress your back, especially think about your shoulder pads are on. They're
Yep.
all strapped in tight. You got all those guys on top of you, and you really just kind of have to hold your breath and stay calm.
Yep. Not to
Stay
mention
calm.
all the stories you hear of what happens at the bottom of piles and
Yeah, right.
but we'll save that for maybe another vault story,
Yeah.
at a later time. But
Well,
kind
hey,
of
I'll put that one back here. We'll dig into
yeah,
it one day.
yeah, yeah. Kind of what you mentioned though, in regards to that Florida team and just like, nobody had that expectation of that team being able to beat Ohio State. So after this weekend, we've had a couple weeks where there have been some top matchups. You've had people that maybe are more exposed as um, their weaknesses, I guess, are more exposed. So from this past weekend, we've got the CFP rankings coming out. The first week of those come out next week. I'm curious your kind of thoughts and takeaways from this weekend. Who would you have right now in the playoff if you had to pick?
Oh man, it's kind of tough because I mean, pretty much the same olds have really kind of shown themselves. I mean,
Hmm.
between Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee. I mean, I don't. I've told you before on the show. I want to see Tennessee get in. I think it's good for the SEC to have new blood. It was good for Georgia to win the national championship. Nobody wants to just see it be Bama all the time. What I like to get, wouldn't anybody, all of us in Columbus, wouldn't any Buckeye want to get another piece of Clemson if we
Oh
can
yeah,
make that happen? Beat Michigan, get Clemson, let's say in the first round. Um, it goes 1-4-2-3, correct?
yep, yep,
I don't know how that could potentially all shake out, but maybe Clemson finds some way to the number 3 spot if Alabama knocks off. They could see Tennessee again in the championship game, right? Somehow does it shift out that maybe we get a chance at Clemson? I think that would be cool because I think we've always had plenty of payback coming for them.
yeah,
Ever since that horrible ass targeting call, and that guy for sure caught that ball and turned
yep,
upfield and made a move, and that was a strip and that was a
yep.
touchdown. You felt cheated and robbed. So would I like to see Clemson get in there selfishly so we can get a shot back at him? Yes. I don't really want to see Ohio State, Michigan both in the top 4 after we just beat them. When
Hmm.
we do beat them, and get that payback. And I like the reigning national champion to be there. So Georgia, and so I mean that's kind of, I think I'm kind of calling a shot here. Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee handles their business, and then we'll see how that works out for Clemson. So it could end up being Ohio State and Tennessee. And again, selfishly too, I wouldn't mind that because we talked before about my boy Alex Golish, the OC that's there now. He was a former Ohio State guy. So either way you shake it, I think we get a matchup with some orange.
Yeah, yeah. I would take either. I mean, being in Nashville, it would be an interesting
Right?
environment.
Man. Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd keep
To
me on fire, boy.
I mean, it would be. I would gladly accept it because I still think. I mean, UT's defense is awful. I think they're 102nd right now. They remind me a lot of last year's Ohio State team. Great offense, but terrible defense. And so, I think it's similar to what you would get with an Alabama game. It's going to be a shootout, and I like the way that our defense has been playing enough to at least get enough stops to get them, uh, you know, in the lead late and really be able to take that game over. But then I would have bragging rights over all of the state. So I would gladly accept that if it came down to it. I don't know that they're going to beat Georgia. So to me, it's probably Georgia, Alabama in the championship. And if Alabama beats Georgia, then you've got a one-loss Georgia and one-loss Alabama SEC champion. So it would likely be those two. If Tennessee beats Georgia, then is Georgia left out because let's say they don't get into the SEC championship game. I agree with you. I don't think the loser of the Ohio State Michigan game would get in. I think there's too many kind of those one-loss teams that would wind up being conference champions, and I don't see the Michigan game being close. So I don't think it's going to be close enough to give them the nod because I think we just I don't think I really don't. I think this team is really out for. for revenge from what that team has been saying over the course of this entire offseason, from what the talking heads have been saying about this team being soft, and I really think they're going to come out and punch them in the mouth and never look back. So I think that loser is just going to the Rose Bowl. And then you have maybe a Clemson. I don't. Clemson to me hasn't looked like a top four team, so it's tough for me to say that they would be in. But at the same time, if they go undefeated, win the ACC, then I don't think you can leave them out either.
And TCU's sitting there at number 8.
Yeah.
So do they realistically think that they're ever going to be able to jump up over top of even a one-loss Bama? Probably not. Was interesting to see. I'm as big of a Brian Kelly hater as there is out there, man. But to see them chip off in pretty good fashion by what? I think 24, 25 points. Ole Miss. That was a strong performance. I mean, Oregon, UCLA, kind of disappointing. Was hoping to see with UCLA coming into the league, into the conference, that they would be able to handle their business and still keep doing some good things. Because even though they'll be in the following year, it's always good good foreshadowing. But I guess as you really start to look at defensively, those are the things that kind of win you championships. I mean, would Ohio State's defense give up 24 points to UT Martin? Tennessee's, like you said, they're 102nd in the country. I hadn't seen that number, and that was surprising to hear you say that to me, that they're over outside of the 100 mark. So at that point, you put a ton of pressure on Hendon Hooker, offensively for them to score points. It's going to be at a premium. And then you just hope that you get a performance like Alabama, where you're in it at the end and you can, maybe it's just a magical season. So hopefully that is for Tennessee. Again, I'm pulling for them. I'd like to see them do some good things.
Yeah, we'll see. Again, like, you got that matchup in a couple weeks. I think if Ohio State wins this weekend, it wouldn't surprise me if they jump to number 1, if it's convincing, especially. But then I think whoever wins that game next week in Georgia is probably gonna be top of the rankings again, anyways. And I think it's gonna be Georgia, but I agree. I would like to see somebody other than Georgia and Alabama be competitive in the SEC and being kind of involved in that conversation. And Tennessee's the logical choice right now. Like, to the Ole Miss point, I did not see that happening. I saw they were plus at 1.5 and jumped all over it because I just could not see them losing to LSU, let alone losing the way that they did. So I think you learn a lot about that team. You learn a lot about Mississippi State getting steamrolled by Alabama. You learn a lot about the other SEC teams as well. And it's a 3-team race there, in my opinion. And it'll come down to next week's game, most likely, who's going to be in the SEC championship game, and those 2 teams probably are the 2 that make it in.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah,
college football at its finest, man, coming down the line. I mean, heck, this is Ohio State's biggest game coming up. I know we're going to kind of segue into that, man, but I think everybody's kind of had the Nittany Lions circled. To me, the way Michigan beat up on them, you just hope that we see the same thing. People will make a lot of comparisons, but only time will tell on that.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because, like, to that point, I mean, they made the comparisons this week against Iowa, obviously. But you also have the consideration of Michigan went to Kinnick, played on the road. We're going on the road to play Penn State. Penn State went to the Big House. So, what kind of difference does that environment make when it comes down to it? Right. I think it'll be a similar, I'm not afraid of Sean Clifford. I'm not afraid of, what James Franklin is doing there, to be honest. And the fact that it's not a whiteout game, I think, is also in our favor. And being at noon definitely helps.
Yeah, it does. Whiteouts are not fun over there, man. Know a little something about that. I mean, it's enough to completely take you out of your offensive game plan. There's a lot of things that you can do to prepare for going on the road. We used to always crank up a lot of high crowd noise and even just, they flip on, so we'd have a DJ come in and just play music loud as possible inside the indoor facility at the Woody Hayes. And it's still nothing near as deafening as what it was like in Happy Valley that night we were over there in 2005. I mean, my center, Nick Mangold, is 2 to 3 feet away from me. and all I could see was his lips moving. He's making the call, and you can't even make out from 2 to 3 feet away. So I know the coaches talked about up in the press
Hmm.
box, they felt it shaking underneath them. It's a great environment, but we got a little bit more chilled out at noontime. So that's you're right.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be loud. It's going to be a tough environment. It always is, regardless of time. So I don't, you know,
They won't be as drunk.
yep, exactly.
It'll still be loud, but they won't be as drunk, and it'll
Yeah.
be at 12 o'clock. So
Yeah.
it's let's just say it's that much more manageable.
Yeah. So, and I guess to that point, do you see anything from this team that makes you or gives you pause, I guess, for, the hopes for the Nittany Lion fans out there that they are going to be able to play spoiler and get the win?
I think you have to look at their secondary. Okay, if they, Joey Porter is a good player, Jair Brown. I mean, they're talented. How does CJ come back and bounce back into that on the road in the environment with the elements, all that stuff going on? I don't. I expect typically when you see a, let's say, nonchalant performance from the offensive line at Ohio State, it's always followed back up with getting nasty and getting after it. So
Hmm.
I expect to see these guys come out and get after some of their, younger players. I know there's a handful of sophomore linebackers. One of the defensive ends, I believe, is a transfer guy who's pretty good, Chop Robinson. I'd like to see how individual battles there as well,
Hmm.
coming off the edge. But I think I don't expect them to slow the run as much as Iowa did. So I don't think CJ Stroud is going to have as much on his plate, which will open up the run game. Essentially, that opens up the pass game, and maybe CJ will be able to pick on some of those guys. But I think it's a more talented secondary than what we've seen. Um, Defensively, get after Clifford, and I don't think you're going to have any issues. That seemed to be the recipe for the Wolverines. Get after
Yep.
Clifford. Don't let him get hot. Some decent little weapons that he's got with Parker Washington. I'm a big Caden Saunders fan. Got a chance to call him out of Columbus when he was at Westerville South. Called a couple of his games. I know that the young freshman Drew Aller is
Yep.
behind Sean Clifford. So, I hate to ever foreshadow anybody's injury or leaving a game, but I could see potentially Sean Clifford, this defensive line with Mike Hall and these guys getting after him. I think there's going to be, not that there's a need for, but I just think the type of cat Jim Knowles is, there's going to be an elevated level of defense this week
Yep.
and an elevated level of let's get to this dude who just, I believe, became the second 10,000-yard passer in Penn State history this past week. Let's get
Well, he's
after
been
this
there long
dude's ass.
enough, so I would hope so. I mean,
Right? It feels like he's there forever. And then I see him like, okay, I'm over here like, who was the last dude to do it when they're
yeah,
asking the question on Aflac? I'm like, Todd Blackledge? You're like, no, Trace McSorley. I'm like, God, he was there for
yeah,
like 7 years.
yeah,
So like they've had the same two quarterbacks for like the last decade at
yeah,
least.
yeah. It's hard not to be the stat leader, in those cases. Kind of
Yeah,
similar to JT Barrett. I mean, him being at Ohio State for essentially the starter for 4 years definitely
yeah.
helped his statistical presence in the numbers.
Right. Nobody's going to sit here and probably say that Sean Clifford or JT Barrett was the best quarterback to ever
Yeah.
line up for either squad, but the numbers don't lie, and it's eye popping. So as a defensive coordinator, I guarantee the message to the front seven is let's get after this dude's ass from the
Yep.
first snap all the way through. Let's not let him get this ball off. Let's quick stuff. Don't even let him breathe. Which and I love that they're I try and focus in on their offensive line a little bit. I know they've had some injuries, some shuffling around. Bryce Effner, number 72. I always key in when I see a number 72 out there because it's all about the number, man. So if
Hmm.
they're not living up to the number, whatever team they're playing for, I'm going to let them
Yeah.
know about it. But I know they've shuffled some guys around. Their center has probably got the best lineman name in the country, Juice Scruggs. But
Yeah.
I think
That's a center
I
name.
think with a little bit of their shuffle, I think our defensive line, our front seven, I think we're going to have our way with them. I guarantee there's going to be. Jim Knowles is smart. He's getting paid to be smart.
Hmm.
He's going to throw something. He's going to throw a little wrinkle out there defensively that we probably haven't seen all year, just to keep Michigan up late at night.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to me to see the the product on the field after you hear all the reports that Jim Knowles is consistently saying that they've still only shown about 20% of
Yeah.
the defensive playbook and saving a lot of it for this week,
He'll
specifically.
he'll show a little bit of that out there just to keep the Wolverines up at night
Yeah.
thinking, a couple weeks down the road, they're gonna be like, oh, he did. Wow, why did he do that? Whoa, what's this here? And it's enough for you just to fool your own self because
Yeah.
unfortunately, as players and coaches, sometimes we just overthink things too much, and that's when bad things happen.
Hmm.
Just be natural, go out there. Hey, if somebody walks up in the A gap, take them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a big difference too. Like you see the guys just actually staying in their appropriate lanes. They're in position where they
Yeah.
need to be, and it wasn't the case last year. You had a lot of confusion, just people out of position, and that leads to big plays. And you see a lot of the guys that are, I remember a play from this past weekend. Zach Harrison blew up a stretch play off to the outside, and you just see his long arm just stick out and just corrals the guy and brings him down behind the line for a tackle for loss. And that was a play that last year probably would have gone for 15, 20 yards, because they would have been out of position somewhat, or overplayed it, even a little bit. So I agree with you there. I think they're gonna have their way. I'm curious to see. This will probably be the best running back that we've seen so far. Nick Singleton. He's had a dynamic year so far, but I think that'll be a good indicator too as we kind of start again getting into those better offensive lines, better teams. And what we would see potentially with like a Blake Corum as we get closer to the end of the year and closer to the Michigan game as well.
It's going to be your same old when it comes down to Big Ten conference games. Tough matchups like this when you're talking about the elite level of the Big Ten. When Penn State and Ohio State get together, it's just like football up in the Northeast Ohio area. Who can establish the run first? Who can establish the run the longest inside of that game?
Yep.
If you win the line of scrimmage, if you win the rush game, if you win the turnover battle, I'm going to give you probably 92 to 93% chance to win this game.
Yep.
Whoever
Agree.
wins those three categories, that's your telltale sign.
Yep.
Control the ball, secure the ball, control it, and dominate your opponent in the trenches. You'll win this ball game.
Yeah, and I fully expect all three facets to be won by Ohio State. Crazier things have happened. Obviously, it is also Halloween weekend, so you never want to say never.
They're going to be out there tailgating even earlier now.
Oh
So the
yeah,
12 o'clock doesn't matter because they're going to start drinking. They won't go to sleep from the night before because it's trick or treat.
fair,
So
fair.
they're doing that. As long as there's let's say no asteroids come in and like block the sun at noontime, nothing crazy. Like, yeah, we won't see that crazy happen.
Yeah.
So we're still going to be lucky that the sun's out. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like over there, but I know that we don't have too many nice warm days left. But I think a lot of times you think of some of those old throwback Penn State Ohio State games when it was cold and it was nasty towards the end of the year, and this is a game where you want to see just a nastiness from your boys up front. You need to have that. It's always a physical battle when Penn State and Ohio State get together. To me, this is our second behind what we have with Michigan.
Yep.
Michigan is the greatest rivalry in college sports. Right behind that, biggest rivalry for Ohio State is Penn State. We're right next to each other. A lot of us all grew up playing the Big 33 game against each other. I know they don't do that now. They've kind of shifted. I think it's Maryland and Ohio that do it now, like back in the day. But we all, we've followed each other. We compare ourselves to each other. Who's tougher? State of Pennsylvania, state of Ohio, and it's there's no love lost, man. So we'll get it on in Happy Valley at noontime and let the rest of the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be a fun weekend. I'm looking forward to it, and then we'll get into November. We'll get into that contender month. So
Contenders,
right.
here we go.
That's right, baby. Well, that's gonna do it for us. TJ, thank you again for joining. It's always a pleasure talking, and I know we can get a little long winded with these episodes, but all great content, conversation. And there's plenty more of that both at BuckeyeScoop.com as well as via the Buckeye Scoop YouTube channel. Just search Buckeye Scoop at YouTube.com. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, and check out all the other amazing content like The Vault. I know we're going to have some more episodes and stories here coming out from you later this week. So be sure to subscribe and stay up to date with those as they are released. Again, TJ, I appreciate it, man.
All right, guys, stay tuned, man. See you later, Scoop World. Ryan, later, man.
Take it easy.